So how would we set it up to calculate p hat? 54 divided by 150. And what do we get? 0.36. How do we get q hat? Subtract it from 1, we get 0.64. Now, these came out to 2 decimal places exactly. These are proportions though, so if they don't stop, how far do we go? How many decimal places do we usually go for proportions? 3. So we're going to continue on with that same thing. If we have to do any rounding for p hat and q hat, we are going to 3 decimal places. Point estimate. We had the point estimate for mu, and that was x bar. The point estimate for rho, the population proportion, is p hat. So if all they want is a point estimate, you just give the p hat. Maximum error of estimate. We had the same kind of value when we were doing the confidence intervals for mu. We started with our point estimate, and we expanded in both directions by the value e. This time, our e is slightly different. We're still using a z-score. So the value at the very bottom of our t-distribution table, where degrees of freedom is infinity, those are the values that we're going to use, because those are the standard normal distribution values, or our z-scores that we're going to use based on our confidence level. This is our standard deviation. So it's the square root of p hat times q hat over n. Slightly different formula, might take some practice getting used to doing that. And make sure you put it in your calculator correctly. So that is how much we're going in both directions to get this interval. Criteria. Confidence intervals for proportions must meet this criteria. N times p has to be greater than or equal to 5. N times q has to be greater than or equal to 5. If that is not true, you cannot use this to get a proportion interval. If we were taking an AP test, you would have to show that it meets the criteria before you could go ahead and actually do the process. Okay, so that is important. Here is a formula. You probably already can visualize what it's going to be, because we know how we built the confidence interval formula when we were dealing with the population mean mu. Same kind of thing here. As you probably noticed on our AP statistics type questions and multiple choice things, they write theirs slightly different than this when they're trying to get their interval. So if we have a question similar to that, they will probably write it something like this. Or use it with the plus or minus instead of having it all drawn out like this. Okay, so just so you're aware of it, you might see it this way on an AP style test question. Rounding rule, already discussed it. It's a proportion rounded 3 decimal places. That's for the intervals, that's for p hat, that's for q hat. They're all proportions. Go up and change that real quick. Thank you. Is that what we have? Great. Second enter, once again, use it to fix an error. Now we can use it to get the other side more quickly. Change it to a plus, got your other answer. Rounding to 3 places. That'll give us our minimum in our interval is 0.096, and our upper one, 0.144. Now our calculator will actually do the whole thing for us again. Just like it did for the other ones, we need to get a different option. So let's go to stats, take a left because it's faster, and we are still doing an interval. We're doing interval for proportions. and we're doing it for one proportion, because there's two different options down below here. One is for one proportion, Z interval, and one's for a 2 proportion, Z interval. They're the two different options. We just have one sample, so we want option A. Things we need to put in. X and in our confidence level. Did they give us an X? 60. Right, that's our value of things that have the characteristic and are in 500. Confidence level was 90%. Make sure you put it as a decimal. 90, right? Okay. Enter. Enter. There we go. When I want it from the calculator, write it in as is. We're not doing any rounding. This is to make sure I know that you know how to do it in your